Study motivation is often an issue for many students, and it's something that a lot of students are struggling with and they try to grasp it. So therefore, this very brief video where I'll be covering certain elements that will help you out further. So first of all, there's a so-called mood to study, which I'll discover briefly. Distraction in place, that's how you can deal with that. The systems that you need to have in place, and that will help you a lot to move forward. Self-talk, which is very important, and also recharging the battery. So let's dive into it. Now, mood to study is kind of interesting because you cannot depend your studies on whether you're in the mood to study or not. Because first of all, it's going to be very vague, very inconsistent, and also called the willpower to study. Look, you cannot rely on willpower or mood to study. That's not going to work. So that's something you need to understand. So you need to replace it by triggers and other concepts and methods to bypass this element here, this hurdle. So it's a bit like running. If you run yourself, for example, if you know people that run, they will never say that the run itself was difficult, but it's often just putting the shoes on. And even athletes mention that. Even a great friend of mine who was a great athlete, he told me that, well, running itself was never the issue. Good weather, bad weather, raining weather, snowy weather. It was always putting on the shoes. And that is, as soon as he was putting on his shoe, he said, look, the running was no issue. It was just easy peasy. So he said that the trigger was, hey, I need to put my shoes on and then I go to running. So before that moment, there was this hesitation there. That's something that can be overcome, and let's cover that by some other topics and other techniques out there. But you need to understand that there are a lot of, before we dive into that, there are a lot of distractions that misplace us even before we start putting our shoes on and start studying. So there is the digital space, there is the physical space, the social space, mental space, and each of that give distractions. Obviously, digital space is the cell phone, which, let's be honest about it, is very much distracting, and you need to find a way to deal with that. There's also the physical space, is where you are working and studying. Is it warm? Is it free of noise? Can you concentrate? Things like that. Social space is are your friends aware that you will be studying certain days and evenings, so that you don't get disrupted or, let's say, triggered or pulled into social activities, which has nothing to do with studying. So that's important to deal with that, to put some clear boundaries there. And also have a video on this, by the way. But also mental distractions. What is distracting you when you're studying? What are the thoughts that pop up and how to deal with that? Now, for that, I have a separate video. I'll give it in the comment, in the link, a link for that, because these are quite straightforward to deal with, these distractions. So, systems in place. So you know that mood is not going to do much. There can be distractions, but do you have systems in place? And certain the systems that we can discuss here is system to be more productive, to track study time, which is going to be very relevant, also to stimulate, to keep on going. But also the 3 study methods most used by students, and that's a lot of mistakes are made on that. The persistence, ways to stay persistent. Also the memory palace, how to memorize easily, and have a complete study system in use. Now, let's dive into productivity tools. Now, there are a lot of productivity tools out there. So each of these productivity tools are ways to trigger you or to stimulate you or to declutter the mess out there. For example, the Pomodoro technique is a time-based technique to trigger. Use a timer to keep you going. You can easily use a short version of that. Use only 5 minutes. Say, hey, you put your time for 5 minutes and say, look, I will start studying for 5 minutes. And by that, you have this trigger and you keep on studying. Other techniques is like hot starting the day, and technique how to get triggered from the first moment you wake up. The 3-3 method, time boxing, time blocking, day teaming, quarters method, and you name it. So all these methods, I've prepared a separate video on that. Free to check it out and what fits you best. It's good to know 2-3 of these methods because that will fit you by your personality. But having some tools in place will help you to move forward and to keep studying more productive and more easygoing. Now, tracking study time. And it is completely missed that when you study at academic university, that one academic year, on average, takes 1,800 hours study, work time, contact hours, and self-study time, 1,800 hours. And that is 9 months. An academic year is often 9 months, sometimes but 10 months. But it's pretty a lot of work to do in a very short time space. So if you're not used to that, if you come from high school and not used to suddenly dealing with these 1,800 hours to work, then you need a different approach. You need to track your study time. You need to track how many hours you study for each course, because how will you know if you're reaching the final stage of your study or not? So knowing where you are, for example, in a 100-hour study course, and if you're already at 80 hours, that will stimulate you already to close that gap for 100 hours. And that course might be, on average, 100 hours as calculated, as presented. It might be for you 90 hours or 110 hours. You will never know, because it depends on your personal skill set. But having a study system in place where you track your study time will be very helpful for each course you take at university. So that's important to have. And it will also stimulate you and help you have a good, clear view of where you are and where you can go. Now, the 3 study methods used by most students. There are 3 study methods used, and that has been discovered by a study of 1,600 students, that they realized, hey, by the way, most students are only using 3 methods in one way or another. And the classical one, most announced on social media, is the achievement-based study method. It's about pushing through. It's about, yes, collecting the hours, which is important, but it's about pushing through basically the hard way of doing it. It's a hard way. It's not a very clever way, but it's an approach. But it only gives you average study results. There's also the meaning-oriented study method, which is about finding the meaning and finding the interest and following your interest. It's a remarkable study method because it's about interests. It's about students that are really motivated. But sadly, it gives negative study results. The reason is very simple, because people get distracted, and therefore they don't move forward. The only way that will help you strongly is so-called non-reproductive study method, because it's about understanding the course first and moving forward. So it's about dealing with this frustration of not understanding and moving by layer by layer by repeating a lot, so that you get the full grasp of the study course. And you get also focused on the examination questions. That's often missed by the other methods. So if you are looking for a study method, this non-reproductive study method is the one you should be looking for. So, persistence. On persistence, there is a so-called Seinfeld method. So I'll give you a bit of context here. Seinfeld is a stand-up comedian, a general comedian, by the way, but he was really known for a stand-up comedian. He had this issue that as a comedian had to find jokes, and so the only way to get to an amount of jokes was to write every day. And some days were productive, and some days were lesser productive. But it was about daily habit of getting to writing. And the same with studying, it's about daily habit of getting to studying. So he has a so-called Seinfeld method. I have a video on that, feel free to check it out. It's a very straightforward method, but it gives you the motivation to keep on going day by day. A variation of this is the Ivy Lee method, where it is about having, and each evening finding the 6 most important tasks to do the next day and executing these 6 most important tasks the next day. Also have a video on that, feel free to check it out. This is, both of them are very helpful. They're also variation on that. So feel free to check out the method that fits for you. But this is about getting the train going, to get the locomotion going. So on the memory palace, what is important here is that part of just studying is memorization. Let's be honest about it. It's not all of it, but it's about memorizing a certain amount of data in a rather short time. But very few students have a study system in place, and the so-called memory palace, which is very much about having a memory palace in mind, where in each room you leave an item, and you go to room to room to room, and you recall that memory, you call that item. It can be a palace, and actually palace in your mind, but it can also be a journey. You walk your journey from your home to, let's say, the library, or the sport hall, or the university. On each landmark you leave some items, and by walking in your mind through that path you recall these items. I have a course on that, by the way, for free available. Feel free to check it out. In about 30 minutes you will understand the technique, how to apply it, and you will get results for 100% impressively fast. It is an extremely fast method. Let's say 100 items. To memorize 120 items will take you roughly 20 to 30 minutes, but you'll able to memorize the 100 items in the right order even, and backwards as well. So if you need a method and you don't have a method, feel free to check it out, because you will need it. It will be so helpful when you study and when you're memorizing a large amount of data. Now, there's also the issue of a complete study system. What I meant by that, a lot of techniques online are about the Feynman technique and the Pomodoro technique, all that, all nice and well, because it will help you on the study moment itself, but it doesn't provide you the full picture, like tracking study time or repeat cycles or memorization cycles. So all that is missing. So therefore, if you're in need of a full system, I have a course on that, a so-called Fast Track University Foundation program. I have a link in the comment. Feel free to check it out. It's available the fees are rather affordable. So it will help you to, in a very short time span, have a method in place to help you forward. A lot of students don't have a method. That's fine. I mean, they struggle, and you can find out yourself. But if you feel that you need some help with that, feel free to check out this course, this online course. Now, the other issue is self-talk. And self-talk is a way how we communicate with ourselves. And sometimes we're a bit idiotic about it. And there's Emil who had this quote once, who said, "Every day and everywhere I'm getting better and better." And he realized by having this mantra, he realized that, yes, by giving himself this command, by reprogramming himself, he was realizing he was paying attention to things that he could improve. So yes, in every day and every way, he was getting better and better, because he was giving himself this very positive feedback, this self-talk. Other variation of that for you can be every day and every way I'm studying better and better, meaning you will find tools and concepts to improve your studying. It can be also, I can do this by breaking down into smaller steps. If you feel freezed, if you feel like overwhelmed by the avalanche of tasks to do, by breaking down a smaller step, you say, hey, I can handle that. It's very much about asking yourself and look at how far you have come versus, hey, I still have to do that. So it's the concept of the glass half full or half empty. It's about asking yourself, hey, what can you do differently? It's very much about the growth mindset, what you can learn versus a fixed mindset. Now, there's also called RET, the Rational Emotive Therapy or Theory. It's sometimes the things we tell ourselves, it's very negative. Due to upbringing, it's a lot of old culture, by the way, so don't blame yourself. It happens to everybody. But sometimes these commands we tell ourselves are very harsh and very demanding. I have to do this. I ought to be doing this. And by saying that in such format, it freezes up, because it feels like an obligation, and it freezes up, even although it's all true. But it's putting it in that way is not helpful. It's much more helpful if you translate it, or we make it a different sentence, like, I would like to study. I have a desire to do well in my studies, or I have a desire to do well in this course. I really want to do this course very well. And by reframing it differently, you start already feeling much better and much more open for change and progress. So actually changing the way we speak to ourselves is very helpful. RET is a very fascinating concept. There's a lot of other concepts attached to it. Feel free to check it out. It's an amazing concept to understand. It fits under the cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a very well-known positive therapy approach on change the way you think in such a way that you can improve your life. Now, psychology, it might be also an element of psychology. We have sometimes fear of failure, fear of success, anxiety issues. This is a bit out of scope of this video. You might consider going to a psychologist, because you might have fears that blocks us, fears that are irrational and can be dealt with. So don't feel afraid of it. A lot of universities have, let's say, centers for that, or they can help you if you're dealing with things like that. There's also the element of social group choice. What I mean by that, well, it's very helpful to avoid negative people, avoid people that complain, avoid toxic people, avoid to put energy in those people, because at the end of the day, they will put you down, and that's it. That's the way of working, that's the way of thinking, and they feel convinced they're right. And by doing so, they draw you in their drama. So it's, I would say, don't pick up that rope. Don't accept their so-called gifts, And you politely refuse them. You say, look, that's nice to know, but I have other things to do. And you move on with your own life. Really avoid these people. It's not about rejecting them. They have their issues to solve, but it's about choosing for your own life. And that's going to be very helpful in your progress. It's also an element of recharging. Like motivation to study is easy said and well done. But if your battery is very low, it's going to be very tricky. So self-care is important, sleep, healthy food, movement, social activity, social interactions, friends, family, also walks in nature, and also ways to relax. What I mean by that, when you study, you should be studying, and when you relax, you should be relaxing. If you're relaxing, you should not be thinking about, oh, I should be studying. No, it's nonsense. So therefore, have a good planning in the way you work and the way you study, the way you plan your day, the way you plan your week will liberate you time to relax. And that's very, very important. You deserve that. And that needs to be acknowledged, needs to be respected. If there is something that will, that if you're looking for something like a book to help you out further, William Ury from Harvard Law School, he is a professor focusing on negotiation, by the way. He wrote a couple of books, and one book is Getting to Yes with Yourself. He wrote also the book Getting You to Yes for pure negotiation. But Getting to Yes with Yourself is about, hey, how do you negotiate with yourself? How is your way of thinking? How are you dealing with that? And he wrote this very short book, very worthwhile to read. A brilliant guy, by the way. I've met him in Harvard, in Boston, a couple of years ago. Very, very open-minded guy, very, very straightforward guy. No nonsense, humble guy, a very clever guy. So really worthwhile to check this book out. So to check it out. No, you got this. I covered quite a lot. I realized that very different elements. It's very much about climbing the mountain. And yes, it might all seem scary and like, oh yeah, I have to climb this mountain, I have to achieve that and all that. I have to take step by step. But it's about very much taking step by steps. And time to time, yes, we have to zoom out and see the big picture here. And that will help you a lot to realize, hey, this is what I need to do. There's a couple of mountains to climb, certain courses to take, certain exams to pass. And yes, but it's not all that dark. It's about planning your journey, taking step by step. And understanding that and zooming out time to time will help you to give perspective to what you need to do. And being stuck and frozen and think like, oh, I'm not so motivated, I feel lost. Yes, it happens to everybody. But feel free to zoom out at the time and say before dive into it. So that's also important. So there are a lot of things to do. If you want to work on self-motivation, very things are overlapping. It can go very deep in yourself. It can be replaced by a very simple technique. So play with that and see how it is going. So that concludes our short video on troubleshooting on study motivation. Feel free to like this video if this was relevant for you. Follow my channel for more, and I'll see you there.